Welcome to the Advertising Forum. This is episode 1 of our new Agentic Monetization series, sponsored by Mula.
With us today is Jason White, CEO of Mula. He's joining us to talk about why he created the company and what Agentic Monetization is. Jason, welcome to the Advertising Forum.
Thanks so much, guys. Great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. All right, so Agentic is hot in the market. We've heard a lot of companies touting the word, touting the phrase. I want to step it back just for a moment before we start with these questions. With your background, when it comes to digital content monetization, in particular with publishers, where do things stand today? And how do we get here? And what's driving the current state of play?
Yeah, it's salacious. It's a great question.
It has to be salacious.
It has to.
What it's all about.
If it bleeds, it leads. No. So where we got today is an amalgamation of a lot of things. Number one, traffic was free. Digital media publishers are built on a pillar, 2 pillars actually. One is traffic and getting really good ninja-like capabilities from an SEO perspective and mining all of that traffic that comes to a website. And the second pillar is monetization, right? So once you have all those eyeballs on the website, let's put an ad here. Let's put an ad here. Let's put an ad here. Oh, you're going to get a guarantee to put like this real estate here. Yay. Right. And the net is when you got free traffic, you don't have to be that thoughtful about who the user is, what their customer journey is, like you would with a traditional subscription publisher. Like I think of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, like they know staging. They think like a CRM. They think like a marketer. Traditional digital media publishers that are ad focused have, rightfully so, and not to their detriment, and no knock on them, but like they haven't had to until now. And so the world that we see today is, like I said, an amalgamation of all of those things. And, there's too much clutter. Users are you hear comments like they're one and done in terms of consuming content. They see what they want and then they just leave. Well, that's an axiom only because it's been manifested to be an axiom. Because we've put too much clutter on the page, they ultimately jump off. And so that's kind of at the core of Mula. It's where technology is today. Like, how can you use LLMs, AI, to fight AI, the things that are ultimately impacting your traffic, to create more personalized experiences, more personalized content on pages, just like the social media and walled garden companies do.
I don't think I've ever heard anyone explain it that way, Jason, that, it's free. And so then the ad support and the user experience is no longer a focus. The monetization is, but how important the user base is when you have them on page. You mentioned prior to our recording that you had worked with a major agency. They asked you for a particular product. You built it. They didn't see scale and they basically turned it down. But you happened to see something while you were building this. Can you share what it is that you saw and what made this a sure thing for you to lean in and solve for?
Certainly. Yeah, it was kind of going back to the days, I think, where AI was really cornerstone, invented. The genie was out of the bottle. It was machine learning. And that for me was at MySpace and the Fox Audience Network. I mean, we had invented RTV at the time. So we were a pioneering group anyway. But we also had these incredible psychographic segments of J.K. Rowling fans and Beatles fans and, all of this non-structured data, right? If you remember your old MySpace page of, blogging about the things that you're interested in. We had a large agency. Names will remain nameless, but you know who you are. They came and said, hey, listen, we're very interested in that. Those segments are game changing. There's demographics out there, but you have it's almost like psychographics plus. If you build a platform for us where you can surface those segments, we'll bring in our 25-year-old media buyers and the dump truck will be backed up and here's your cash. Maybe with advertisers like Procter & Gamble or somebody like that. So, of course, we were off to the races. And of course, it took us 6 months to build it. We did caveat by saying these segments are called hyper targets. So they're super small. But if you aggregate them all, you can have very interesting media plans. And so when we did that, shocker, they came back and said, the segments are really small. And so as we were licking our wounds, having a couple beers with our machine learners, afterwards, we looked at the product that we had built, and one person looked to another person and said, the P scores on this are out of this world and almost predictive, like you can predict the weather. Like, what do you mean? We're like, the density of data on an individual user, we know so much about them that if we had a signal on an advertiser's order confirmation page, we could find orders of magnitude of that advertiser's customers in advance of them even knowing that they wanted that product. So we tested it on a bunk bed advertiser. They sold 5,000 bunk beds a month. And it took 30 days for us to see all of that across the entire Fox Audience Network, not just MySpace, but third-party properties that we had in terms of reach. And we activated the campaign after those 30 days. And within 24, 48 hours, they called us urgently, emphatically saying, turn it off. And we're like, is it not working? They said, no, we've sold 20,000 bunk beds.
That is
they couldn't
amazing.
Deliver them. Yeah. And so for me, like it was revelatory. It wasn't even that, it was game changing. So for me, like I said, the genie was out of the bottle, and it just kind of changed my worldview in terms of just how powerful data can be. And it can be used in ways that can customize, people's experiences. And then cut to 2 years later, Facebook ads platform, and then cut to their feed. And, now my mother says, I swear, they just listen to me. And I'm like, Mom, they're not listening to you. They just know so much about you that it's that density of data. I call it branches of a tree. They have so many branches on you, and you look like this other person that did this act or took this action. And because of that, you have a more personalized content experience. This is not a bad thing.
Definitely not a bad thing. The experience that you went through with bunk beds is similar to how I experienced Step Brothers, one of my favorite movies ever. So, the impact of bunk beds, it's powerful, and it's powerful within our digital realm. So with that said, though, Jason, being more serious, putting on my serious cap for a moment.
Great analogy, by the way. It's so good.
Thank you. John C. Reilly grew up down the street. So with that said, when did we essentially lose the plot on personalization? And why did it matter so much?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that it was, when I mentioned before, it's not publishers' fault. Like, why would you try and solve for something like that when traffic is endless? Seemingly, right? Like, there is a mousetrap that was created in terms of this great thing called a search engine that brought all of this traffic, this intrigue to your pages, and you could design pages that ultimately answered that question. And people wrongfully or rightfully took a little too much advantage of that. I think that we've seen evidence of that in the past, where Google's like, maybe we should change the algorithms a little bit because, content farms and, things ultimately start to get produced off of that. But I think that you lose the plot once something like that happens, and you're just like, well, if I put this ad on it, and if I put this ad on it, and VCs got behind it, and they funded a lot of these ad tech companies. And as they say, the band kind of played on. It just kind of manifested itself in that. I think the industry kind of gets caught up in that. I happen to work in the mortgage industry for a little company called Countrywide Home Loans before Bank of America acquired us. I've seen this movie before, just in a different set of clothing. So yeah.
Wow. That's a great pull. That's a blast from the past.
Yep.
Why Mula? What is it? Why is it so powerful? Help us understand. For those that aren't familiar with what you're building, ATG and I are fascinated about it. We've had a couple calls when you told us about it. Tell us more. Lean in.
Certainly. Ever had experiences where your parents tell you, like, well, I did when I was growing up. My father was an madman, and he said, you just work harder than 9 out of 10 people out there, and, success follows. And, the things that you ultimately end up doing find you. And, it's like the path to Ithaca. It's the journey, not the destination. And so for me, like, I look at things that I've been exposed to, the anecdote that we talked about earlier with MySpace and Fox, being exposed to like large language models and machine learnings back then. My experiences on the publisher sides at CBS, Fox and CBS, and, the Arena Group. And then watching technology evolve. Like, we invented RTB on the client side back at Fox, but seeing how that marketplace evolved. I worked with Index and the great Andrew Casale to build header bidding after we kind of discovered it with Lift DNA, which is really a base version that we had at MySpace anyway. When we were at OpenX and acquired that, and we built that out, like seeing all of that stuff manifest. And then you kind of get to this perch and this point where you look at new technologies and you see the things that they're capable of doing. And we just haven't really been here until now, frankly. And when we talk about fighting AI with AI, it's the LLMs are hurting digital media publishers, sure. And there's a certain percentage of traffic that's not going to come back. And can they get paid on that? Sure. I think that will ultimately, I think there's a handful of great initiatives. The IB Tech Lab is leading a great one. And there's a myriad of other companies that are trying to get publishers paid for this. But at the end of the day, the realities are the realities. And you have to look at the technology that we have today and go, how can we do more with less? And I've been advocating for this for the past 5 years, like kind of saw this iceberg coming. We have to create the same experiences that the social media companies have created. People spend inordinate amounts of time there. Why? Because they have the data on users. Why? Because it's so dense. Why? Because dense data can be predictive. Well, when you load content into something like that, it creates doom scrolling. People love doom scrolling. I admit it. Like I do it. My mother does it. Like, and if my mother does it, then that means everybody's doing it. I think is written somewhere. And so for my perspective, it was, taking all of those things into one kind of vision and going, now's the time. It's the perfect moment. Publishers need this more than anything. And let's do it.
What's next for our industry in general? You've been building for a long time.
I think that you're going to see digital media publishers become like marketers, and the really smart ones are going to build sophisticated audience understandings inside of their companies and knowing where to get those audiences and bring them to their sites. So that's going to be in the form of traffic buying, not in a bad way. That's been kind of demonized from the MFA kind of side of things, but really thoughtful, like where are people consuming content and where can we get more of those people to our sites? Growing newsletters. I think that becomes more important, just like marketers have for years. Finding more of your users that way, and becoming kind of like a morning brew type experiences. And so for digital media companies, I think that they very much continue to live on. They're very much as relevant today as they were 10 years ago. They're just going to get way more prescriptive. There's content syndication partners like Apple News Plus. Like I'm constantly swiping to the right and seeing what some of those great articles are. And writing just gets like really, really, really better. And content experiences get really, really, really better because the technology is there in order to do that. So I think we're in for it's a big transition, but anytime when you've looked at big transitions in the past, like, the beginning of the internet, beginning of social media worlds, like it cleans up chaos and, things that are just fragmented unnecessarily so and messy. And so I think that that's where we're going to get to a better experience overall for the web. And I think, a lot of people will kind of say here.
I agree. Jason, I wanted to thank you for joining us today on the Agentic Monetization series sponsored by you at Mula. We're looking forward to episode 2 where we talk to Brandon O'Neill from On3 and Stephanie Mezzamero from Arena Group. Jason, thanks again for joining us today and speak to you soon.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, gents. Appreciate it.